Good afternoon. My name is Doug Mackey. It's a pleasure to be here with our panelists today. I'm working with one of our panelists, Mrs. Cynthia Hughes, on the Weaponization Watch project by the Patriot Freedom Project. And we also have here, of course, Colonel Rob Maness and Garrett Ziegler as well. Thank you all for being here. We are going to be talking about a office of the DOJ called the EDNY, the Eastern District of New York, is a district that comprises Brooklyn, Long Island, Staten Island, and Queens. And it's a little-known district. We hear a lot about the abuses by the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office, which thankfully two great American patriots have done a lot to clean up that office, Ed Martin and Judge Jeanine. Another one we hear a lot about because they prosecute Wall Street is the SDNY, and this is one that we are focused on as well. But today we're talking about the EDNY, which has a long and illustrious history of political weaponization. We're going to hear about that today. So for those that don't know, in 2016, I posted a funny meme in Manhattan, notably not in the EDNY, saying that Hillary Clinton supporters could text their vote and avoid the line and stay home. Now, this was obviously a joke, but not to the EDNY. 4 years later and 7 days after Biden was inaugurated, the FBI came knocking at my door, the New York FBI, and I found out that I was being indicted in the EDNY for conspiracy against rights, a federal felony punishable by up to 10 years in federal prison, a $250,000 fine, because they said that I had conspired in DM group chats to trick people or steal their votes. So this case was brought in the EDNY, even though not a single defendant lived in the EDNY. Not a single defendant was in the EDNY when the supposed conspiracy happened. They said that, number one, that because I sent the tweet out and then I could conceive that it could be seen in the EDNY, well, under that theory of prosecution, I could be prosecuted in Alaska or Wyoming or Hawaii, anywhere in the country. Secondly, they said, well, the tweet went on the wires that go either under the water or over the bridge surrounding Manhattan, which those waters share jurisdiction with the EDNY. Ultimately, we fought venue in the case, but the question was never decided because I won the appeal, and the appellate court ruled that the EDNY didn't even bring evidence in my case to show that I ever was part of any conspiracy to steal anyone's vote. Not to mention there were no victims in the case. They couldn't find a single person who actually believed the meme, and they didn't have any evidence that the cooperating witness, the co-conspirator in the case, and I had ever coordinated on any of these memes or anything like that. So what does this go to show you? It goes to show you how the EDNY brings charges based on tenuous or non-existent evidence, using novel prosecutorial theories. In my case, using a statute that is supposed to be used against people who conspire to injure, threaten, oppress, or intimidate Americans in the exercise of their rights. For instance, masked men chasing people down for voting and assaulting them, or worse, killing them. The statute actually contains a death penalty provision for if your conspiracy results in death. Fortunately, my meme didn't result in anyone dying, so I didn't face the death penalty. But this goes to show why are they targeting me? And we're going to hear about a whole litany of other cases. Well, this is a politicized office. It's a rogue office. They're not only doing the political bidding of the Democrat Party, but also they like flashy prosecutions that make their careers. They don't want to chase your common bad guy like an illegal immigrant selling drugs or whatever on the streets. They want to go after certain industries like finance, crypto, which we've seen time and time again, and they want to go after people like me who are political opponents of Donald Trump. They also went after Donald Trump's great friend Tom Barrack and claimed that he was acting as a FARA, he was violating FARA, the Foreign Agents Registration Act, because he was doing basically normal business activities or normal diplomatic outreach. But once Trump left office, they indicted Tom Barrack. He fought the case and won at trial, was outright acquitted. And he was the chief of Trump's inauguration, I believe, his first inauguration. So with that being said, I want to turn it over to the panel and to first to Colonel Rob to talk about some of the history of the EDNY here and some of the illustrious actors who have come out of the EDNY.
Thanks, Doug. I appreciate that. You know, this coverage of this district in New York and the history behind it is critically important because one of the biggest damages that have occurred to this country over the last 7 years are political prosecutions by partisan political prosecutors against political opponents of those that are in elected office at the time. Guess where, if you had to find the root cause or the deep well of political partisan prosecutors and corruption, where would you go? The Eastern District of New York. And I'm proud to be part of this Weaponization Watch effort with Cynthia because a lot of the folks that we are trying to help and advocate for and get visibility on are being prosecuted by this very district in New York. Let me tell you about some of the people that have come out of this and what they've done to this country. Andrew Weissman. You remember that name, right? From the Mueller witch hunt, the Russian witch hunt against President Trump and his supporters, where they broke every rule and norm and ethics regulation by doing things like destroying all of their cell phones on that prosecution team. Once it found out that the report came out that there was no there, and they spent $20-something million doing it. It was a complete hoax. Andrew Weissman, don't ever forget that. He was the head of the criminal division in the Eastern District of New York. Jack Smith, currently in the news still, the rogue special prosecutor that went after President Trump and all of his supporters over the insurrection, the fake insurrection that was crafted completely by those inside the government and in the political hierarchy, in the party hierarchy of those in power. Jack Smith, and he's still at it today. Well, believe it or not, Jack was the head of public integrity in the Eastern District of New York. It's hard to say that without laughing. Because he's so ridiculous that he's been overturned by the Supreme Court by a vote of 9-0 before, because not even the leftists on the Supreme Court to support this creep that has zero integrity and will do whatever he can to politically hurt those in opposition to whoever he's working for. In this case, it was President Joe Biden. And then, of course, everybody knows the name of Loretta Lynch in the famous discussion on the ramp with former President Bill Clinton.
About the grandchildren.
About the grandchildren, right?
Told us.
Loretta Lynch came out of the Eastern District of New York as the U.S. Attorney to the Attorney General there. So if you want to go find the deep well of corruption and partisan political prosecutions and where they're created at, you probably ought to look at the EDNY first. But remember, the bottom line is this. These people have caused grave damage to the government of the United States and, most importantly, to the sovereigns, the citizens of the United States, because we can no longer count on equal justice before the law until the situation with people like this is rectified and they are held accountable to the maximum extent of the law.
Thank you, Colonel. And I want to add about Loretta Lynch. After Loretta Lynch left the EDNY, there was a prosecutor in Suffolk County, the district attorney's office, named Christopher McPartland. And he blew the whistle about this playing meeting, right? And the EDNY went after this guy after Loretta Lynch went to the U.S. attorney's office and made his life a complete living hell. They charged him with obstruction of justice, and then they unleashed a whole barrage of media leaks to the New York Times, the New York Post, etc. And he complained to the DOJ about these leaks and got nothing back from them. So it really makes you wonder what's going on in the EDNY and the sort of retaliation and the sort of bidding that they're doing of these actors. So Thank you very much, Colonel. And I want to mention Cynthia is a warrior for a lot of defendants in the EDNY, myself included, but she also has a heart of gold, and she's really attuned to the personal stories and, importantly, the families and the effect that these cases have on families. And I could talk about that a lot, and my poor wife and son who had to go through it all. But I want to turn the floor over to Cynthia to discuss about the impact these weaponized prosecutions are having on people's lives and, importantly, their families.
Thank you, Doug. Colonel, that was amazing. Thank you. And I want to tell you, we don't call that an insurrection. We actually call it a fedsurrection, because that's what it was, right, Garrett? On January
Yeah, I mean, it was an insurrection. Nobody brought a gun. Who would have thought? That's a novel theory of the law.
Yeah. So, Doug, as you know, with January 6th, I became, a big advocate, and we focused, mainly on the family core, taking care of the wives and the children, trying to keep as much normalcy for these families as we possibly could. And it became just this monumental, organization and, collective effort with, a group of really great women that were caught up in the January 6th debacle. And so we've spent the last 4 years helping these families, just keeping them connected to one another and, helping them with their bills, their mortgage, their electric, making sure Christmas was happening, making sure Halloween was happening, making sure brand new shoes for back to school was happening. But, 5 years later, where are we, right? Where are we now? So what we learned is that before January 6th, we learned that, we had the warm up, right? We had the warm up. What happened in Michigan, Garrett?
Yeah.
And we call
Kidnapping.
That's right. We call that a fednapping.
Yeah.
Okay. And so we had, the warm up in Michigan with the fednapping. Gretchen Whitmer, she requires attention, and so she really, went out there and created some serious attention for herself. She's a liar, is what she is. But in any event, and then we had January 6th. You have a lot of families that are still broken from the Whitmer fednapping, men that are still languishing behind bars in a supermax prison with El Chapo. And then we have January 6th. And so now, what are we doing now, Doug, right? We have to, I don't say move on from January 6th, but we have to take what we've learned from the Whitmer fednapping, from the January 6th fedsurrection, and we have to apply it now, because we're hearing from so many people around the country who are victims of weaponization. And it may not be from what happened in Michigan. It may not be what happened in here in D.C. on January 6th, but it's because of whatever's going on. And so I don't want to talk about specific families that, we're working with right now, that we're helping, who they are, because they're in the thick of it. But I'll say this, the damage that I've seen with the Whitmer families, definitely with the January 6th families, I'm seeing it now with just families that weren't caught up in a politically motivated, episode, if you will. So we've created Weaponization Watch, and we're going to continue our humanitarian efforts, because there's a big need for that. People need connection. People need to go to somebody who knows how they feel. You go to talk to somebody to say, well, you saw it today here, right? We connected all these different families with January 6th families, and you saw almost like this relief in some of the women that we saw here today, because they're just starting the journey and these other women have come through it. So we have to blow the lid off of weaponization, and you have to start somewhere. And I say we have to start at the EDNY. What the EDNY is doing, there needs to be a special prosecutor appointed to the EDNY. I have somebody in mind who I would like to see doing that job, but he wears enough hats. But his name is Ed Martin. And I think that, Ed has such a spine and a backbone and compassion and love for the core family unit. That guy firsthand. And so we need a bright light to shine on EDNY and SDNY because they now, we're learning, Doug, they are breaking up families. They are threatening people. They are looking to be, they're overzealous, and they're trying to have a big win, like a big payday. And they're doing it at the expense of, tax-paying Americans, okay? People, maybe they support something in finance. People maybe support this president. People, maybe they, supported, I don't know, America's mayor, right? Giuliani, whatever the case, may be. The fact is, we have to shine a light on what is going on in these very, very rogue jurisdictions and how it's impacting these families, how it's impacting children, Garrett, how it's impacting, a wife, men that are going away to prison for 10, 15, 20, 35 years, life in prison maybe. What happens to these little children? That is the biggest thing for me. Why do these jurisdictions like EDNY and SDNY have to have this big win? Why is it such a power trip for these people? Why do they want to take families and rip them apart when they don't have to do that? There needs to be somebody in EDNY right now, Garrett, Doug, Colonel, and somebody needs to shine a light over there because it is, I thought January 6th was bad. No, I got to tell you, January 6th was its own animal, its own monster, whatever. What I'm learning about EDNY, being with Doug's family, being with Doug's baby, seeing this baby, thinking about if Doug was in prison right now, where that baby would be right now, where his beautiful wife would be. No, we have to put an end to this, and we have to shine a light on this, and we have to talk more about this. And I'll just say this last thing. There's 2 women sitting in a Brooklyn prison right now. Doug, you and I know who they are, okay? They're languishing behind bars. They've been there for quite a long time now, okay? Because of a bogus conspiracy charge. That conspiracy charge is so dangerous. Conspiracy is like taking spaghetti, throwing it against the wall, and hoping it will stick. And in the EDNY, it does stick, unfortunately. And if we don't get somebody in there, there's going to be 2 women that are going to be in prison for a very, very, very long time. And we can't have that. And so it takes people like myself and you, Colonel, and Garrett and Doug to stand up and speak out like this. Nobody else is doing it.
Right.
We hope President Trump sees this and hears this and does something and really pays attention to this. We're going to continue to fight for these families.
Absolutely. And these are not hardened criminals. These are family men. And their children, with small children and wives, and they never expected anything like this. It's not like they chose a life of crime and all the consequences that come with it. These are vague charges, novel charges, unsubstantiated charges. And like you said, they introduce the conspiracy element, and they can shift their prosecutorial theory as the new evidence comes in, or their evidence is discredited or disqualified. They're going to shift their theory to make it fit the vague charge. So I want to shift over to Garrett really quickly, because Garrett is, good at looking at these kind of things with an analytical, strategic mind and practical steps. That what can you do with an organization, the federal government, with 2.2 million employees? How in the world are you ever going to get to the bottom of it without breaking the whole thing so that you can't get anything done? So Garrett, you want to speak to this?
Yeah. So the rudimentary education is that 94 districts are in this federal system, right? So there's county courts in this country, municipal courts, but the federal court system is broke up into 94 pieces of pie. Now there's 93 U.S. attorneys. I think Guam and the Mariana Islands share a U.S. attorney. So the EDNY is one of those 94 cutouts. It just so happens that it's one of the most poisonous. And each of these 94 districts will have its own org chart, its own levers of authority, its own FBI agents that will do dirty deeds for them. I know that Douglas, this Megan Reese figure, has worked on multiple ridiculous cases. So these prosecutors become buddy-buddy with certain FBI agents who will submit complaints under oath that are false and get a magistrate judge to sign off on it. So the practical step is you have to have visibility into this entire operation. And the only way you do that is you have to be able to map out these offices and account for every single person with any amount of hard or soft power within the office. So this may sound boring or tedious to some, but you have to get a grip on how the office functions. Right now, if you held a gun to somebody's head and made them tell you everything they knew about the EDNY, they may know who the active U.S. attorney is, some active cases, but they probably couldn't tell you and take you through how the sausage is made. We have to, on the right, and by right, I simply mean this, people who value the Constitution as amended. That's what I define as the right. People who care about constitutional form of government. You have to become interested in how the sausage is made. We have to become sausage connoisseurs in a way. And that's a bad joke, but that's what you have to be. The sausage is made by filling out an org chart. The org chart should be electronic. And whoever comes in, they have to audit every single position. Every single position should be justified for its existence. If you don't do that, they are like termites. There are going to be some people in there that burrow themselves in that still have authority that you haven't nixed yet. And we owe it to the Republican form of government that the executive branch is actually that the elected leader is in charge of the executive branch. Because right now, the elected person, elected by 80 million Americans, at least probably, he doesn't control the entire executive branch. He may control portions of it. I have no doubt that he was aware of what was going on with Maduro, but he needs to be aware of how charging decisions are made in the EDNY because his citizens and voters are getting crushed. And like you said, they're overzealous. They have a desire to win at all costs. And if you're not an independent multimillionaire, or if you don't have people like Cynthia organizing these sorts of institutions, you will get crushed. And so I call on anybody who's interested in the details to bring this up, that we need to know we pay their salary. Mm-hmm. We need to know every single Fed who's at the EDNY.
Right. Personnel is policy, like they say. To illustrate your point, the prosecutor in charge of my case was the election crimes specialist for 2020 and 2024. Do you think he was chasing after ballot stuffing?
And he's still there, I bet.
He's still there, and is he going to be the election crime specialist in 2028? So this is something we're going to look at. I've got, fortunately, some lawyers retained. We're going to look at this EDNY, this gentleman. And as you brought
What's his name?
Eric Paulson.
Paulson. Okay.
And there's only 10 of these prosecutors that are appointed, elections gurus or czars, whatever you want to call them, across the country. They're chasing down memes on the internet, apparently.
The meme was hilarious for the record.
It was funny.
Some levity is absolutely just
absolutely, and to everybody except for the prosecutors of the jury. And secondly, you mentioned Megan Reese. It's a strange one. She was hired in 2014. How did she go from the Washington field office to the New York field office, working on all these politicized cases, accused of being part of a team that was tampering with evidence, and now the rumor is she's moved to Boston. So it's a strange thing. We need to get to the heart of all this. So.
Can I give you a contemporary example?
Yeah, really quickly.
We mapped out 145 federal officials who touched the Biden investigation, 145 of them. So this can be done. We used mind mapping tools like MindMeister. We have to get creative, and there are tools out there to where you don't have to keep this stuff in your head. You should, publicize these org charts. It lets the feds know that they're being watched.
Absolutely.
And Doug, I'm sorry, Doug. I know you want to kick us out, but it's the same thing with the Whitmer Fednapping. It's all the same players.
Yeah.
Colonel from Michigan that came to D.C. right before January 6th.
That's right.
D'Antuono, whatever the heck
he finally left, right? What's he doing? Microsoft, right?
Playing dominoes or something. I don't know. In any event, but it's like it's just repeat behavior.
Yeah.
The Democratic Party, I think we can all agree, is a dangerous, what I'm calling a terrorist organization.
I would call them satanic.
Yeah. I mean, I'll give you.
A few of them are satanic.
That's a conversation for another day, Doug and Colonel. But they need the Democratic. This is not a Democratic Party anymore. It's just not. And we need eyes on not only the Democratic Party but EDNY and SDNY. But EDNY is really It's out of control, guys.
Maybe we can have a webpage on Weaponization Watch. Just all of the sins and abuses of the EDNY.
Let's do it.
Weaponizationwatch.org/EDNY.
And if you want to support all of the conversations you're hearing today, you want to support these women that are languishing behind bars, these other families who are facing a very big crisis here soon, and January 6ers who are still in limbo, go to patriotfreedomproject.com or please go to weaponizationwatch.com and help us continue this fight.
Thank you, everybody.
Guys,
Thank you.
Thank you.